She took in 5 abandoned girls no one cared about, giving them a home when the world had already written them off. But 2 decades later, those same girls returned in a way that left everyone speechless. Adora, a quiet woman who once walked the streets rescuing children lost to hunger and neglect, now watches as the girls she raised, once ragged, fearful, and forgotten, stand tall, confident, and unstoppable. Each carries the scars of a childhood no one claimed, but the love she poured into them shaped something no one saw coming. Who are these girls now? And what action could possibly shock a whole town after 20 years of silence? What secrets did they carry from their past that could change everything in Adaora's carefully guarded life? The bright Nigerian courtyard gleamed under the midday sun. Adora stepped lightly on the warm stone tiles. A bundle of neatly folded clothes clutched to her chest. 5 girls, ranging in age from 6 to 12, froze at the gate, a mixture of fear and longing in their eyes. The youngest, Chinello, barely 7, clutched a worn doll, her tiny fingers digging into the fabric as if it could shield her from the unknown. Ifeanyi, at 12, stood stiff and wary, arms crossed, every muscle taut with mistrust. Obiageli, pale and hesitant, shifted from foot to foot, a small backpack pressed against her chest. The others, Ngozi and Uche, lingered behind, cautious shadows of themselves, carrying a lifetime of abandonment in their gaze. Adora knelt slowly, letting the bundle of clothes fall with a soft thud. "You don't have to be alone anymore," she said, her voice gentle, almost fragile, yet filled with unwavering conviction. Chinello's lips trembled as she whispered, "Why would anyone care about us?" Adaora's eyes softened. "Because someone has to." She reached out, brushing a hand against the girl's cheek, and for the first time, hope flickered across her face. A flashback, 7-year-old Adora at her parents' funeral, the rain soaking her small frame, the crowd dispersing, leaving her and her younger brother behind. The ache of being forgotten had been a constant companion ever since. It was the reason she walked streets searching for lost children, for those the world had abandoned. Over the next months, Adaora's modest home filled with laughter, tears, and the slow building of trust. Chinello sketched golden keys on scraps of paper, not knowing they would one day become a symbol of hidden wealth. Ifeanyi, protective and cunning, learned to channel her street-smart instincts into study, reading, and helping her sisters. Obiageli whispered to shadows, mourning losses too heavy for her age, while Ngozi and Uche quietly observed the world, absorbing lessons Adora didn't even realize she was teaching. The girls' ragged clothing was gradually replaced with brighter fabrics Adora repaired and gifted. The courtyard resonated with tentative joy, yet a subtle foreshadowing lingered. Adaora's locked drawer, a tiny glint of a gold key-shaped pendant around her neck, and a man lingering just beyond the gate, observing silently. Each of these details would ripple through their lives years later. One evening, as dusk painted the sky with streaks of pink, Adora tucked them in. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "the world will be kinder to you, and if not, we'll make it kinder ourselves." The girls' faces, pressed into pillows, reflected a fragile hope. The courtyard, now quiet, seemed to pulse with anticipation, as though it knew these 5 abandoned girls, whom no one cared about, were destined to return to the world stronger than anyone could have imagined. Months turned into years, and the 5 girls began to transform under Adaora's care. The modest home that once echoed with uncertainty now buzzed with life. Books piled high on the wooden shelves, vegetables drying in the sun, laughter spilling from the courtyard. Chinello, the youngest, had a sketchbook she guarded like treasure, her golden keys now forming intricate designs, her imagination unbound. Ifeanyi's sharp eyes noticed every detail in the world around her, a survival instinct honed on the streets, but now paired with a growing curiosity about learning and leadership. Obiageli moved with caution, but had begun speaking to Adora about the dreams she kept hidden, dreams of art, of teaching, of a life beyond constant fear. Ngozi and Uche remained watchful, quietly protective of each other, but their laughter grew louder, tentative steps toward trust. One afternoon, as the sun poured warm light through the veranda, Adora sat with them on the low stone bench. "You all have a choice every day," she said softly, "to let the world make you bitter, or to take what the world ignores and turn it into something beautiful." A flashback interrupted the quiet. Adora, standing in her father's workshop after he had died, the scent of sawdust heavy in the air, listening to her mother's whispers about resilience. That memory, layered with grief and survival, had taught her that love was not enough. You had to create stability and opportunity where none existed. Chinello's eyes lit up. "Do you think we could make something beautiful?" she asked. Her voice barely rose above a whisper, but the question lingered like a spark. Ifeanyi leaned back, crossing her arms, skepticism still shadowing her face. "What if the world doesn't let us?" Adora smiled faintly, her mind drifting to the locked drawer she kept in her room. The small fortune she had quietly saved and invested, untouched, waiting for the right moment. She didn't answer directly, letting the girls' curiosity grow. The suspense would serve them later. Obiageli, fiddling with the hem of her dress, finally spoke. "I want to help people. Like you help us." Adora nodded, the weight of that statement pressing on her heart. It was the first sign that her guidance was planting roots deep enough to outlast childhood. As the evening stretched, the camera panned to subtle details. A necklace on Chinello glinting faintly in the light, the shadow of the man from the streets passing by outside, and a photograph of Adora as a child with strangers whose faces were blurred, seeds for mysteries yet to unfold. Later, as they prepared a simple dinner, Ngozi and Uche exchanged glances, silently calculating and observing. Adora noticed, but did not comment. These glances, this awareness, were the first hints that the girls were beginning to internalize strategy, loyalty, and subtle cunning, a foreshadowing of the strength they would wield as adults. Night fell, and Adora tucked them in once more. "Sleep knowing that tomorrow is another chance," she whispered. But attention lingered, a subtle uncertainty. The world outside was still harsh, and while the girls were learning trust and hope, Adora knew challenges were coming that would test their bond and resilience in ways they could not yet imagine. The courtyard, bathed in moonlight, held its secrets. Every stone, every shadow, seemed to whisper that these 5 abandoned girls, no one cared about, were beginning a journey that would one day shock everyone. Scene 2 introduces character growth, early signs of ambition, and layers of foreshadowing about Adora's hidden resources, the girls' future strength, and external observers. The years pressed on, and the girls began stepping into adolescence under Adora's careful guidance. The modest house had grown cluttered with trophies of small victories, books earned through scholarships, paintings that Obiageli dared to finish in vibrant colors, and carefully mended clothes that now hung in neat rows. Chinello's sketches had evolved, the golden keys now forming patterns that hinted at her curiosity for hidden treasures. Ifeanyi had become fiercely protective of the younger girls, but her eyes, sharp and calculating, caught every detail of the world outside. The strangers in the street, the shifts in market prices, the subtle gestures of people passing by. One humid afternoon, as the sun slanted through the veranda blinds, Adora called them together. "You're stronger than you realize," she said, voice steady but filled with emotion. "But strength alone isn't enough. You need wisdom, patience, and courage." She paused, looking at each girl in turn, her gaze lingering on Obiageli, whose quiet demeanor masked a storm of ambition. A flashback. Adora, at 14, hiding in the attic while thieves ransacked her parents' shop, clutching her younger brother close. She had learned early that courage often required patience, observation, and timing. That lesson now shaped the girls' education, though they didn't yet know it. Ngozi, brushing her long hair behind her ear, asked hesitantly, "Mama, do you think we'll ever be safe out there?" Adora's lips curved into a faint, sad smile. "Safety isn't given. It's created." She allowed the words to hang, a subtle foreshadowing of the independence they would one day need to forge. Obiageli, fidgeting with a pencil, finally broke the silence. "I want to be more than just safe," she said. "I want to make sure no one else feels as invisible as we did." Adaora's chest tightened. The girl had internalized lessons she didn't even know she was teaching, compassion married with determination. Meanwhile, subtle threads of the future began weaving into the present. Chinello, sketching quietly, paused as a glint of sunlight hit a small pendant Adora wore, a gold key-shaped charm. Her curiosity sparked, a seed planted for the revelation years later. Ifeananya observed the neighbor's luxury car parked irregularly on the street, noting details, asking silent questions. Uche and Ngozi, while helping Obiageli organize books, whispered guesses about the world outside, unaware that those instincts would serve as survival tools and strategic advantages in adulthood. That night, Adora tucked the girls into bed, lingering a moment longer than usual. "Dreams are fragile," she whispered, "but the right foundation can make them unbreakable." She turned toward the window, noticing a shadow moving silently along the courtyard's perimeter. A man, always distant, always observing. An unspoken protector whose presence would later prove critical. Foreshadowing layered quietly into the scene. The locked drawer in Adaora's room, the gold key-shaped pendant catching the moonlight, the man outside, and Chinello's innocent fascination with hidden patterns. Each detail, small and subtle, prepared the audience for revelations that would feel earned 2 decades later. The courtyard, now quiet in the night, held the resonance of possibility. 5 girls, abandoned, overlooked, and considered worthless by the world, were slowly building a fortress of knowledge, courage, and resilience under Adaora's guidance. The story of their transformation had begun, but the world had yet to witness the true power of what those who were once abandoned could accomplish. By the time the girls reached late adolescence, Adaora's modest home had become a sanctuary of possibility. The courtyard, once filled with hesitant steps and nervous glances, now rang with purpose and laughter that was confident, if tempered with memory. Chinello, now 15, spent hours sketching detailed architectural designs, the golden keys in her notebooks forming patterns that hinted at hidden codes she didn't yet understand. Ifeananya, 16, had grown into a protective strategist, mapping out the neighborhood, memorizing details others ignored, quietly practicing the art of observation. Obiageli's voice, once soft and hesitant, now rang with authority when teaching the younger girls. Ngozi and Uche, ever watchful, began exploring commerce, learning negotiation and subtle manipulation of circumstance, a foreshadowing of the acumen they would wield as adults. One sweltering afternoon, Adora sat on the veranda, a thin book in her lap, observing the girls. "You're all ready for the world," she said softly, though her eyes betrayed a hint of worry. "But the world isn't always ready for you." A flashback. Adora at 18, working late at a street market after her father's death, clutching coins she'd earned sewing clothes. A man attempted to cheat her. She remembered his sneer, the weight of vulnerability, but she had stood her ground, learning then that courage paired with cleverness could protect her life. That memory had shaped the lessons she now imparted to her daughters, though they had yet to grasp the depth. Chinello looked up from her sketchbook. "Mama, why do you keep that drawer locked?" Her voice was careful, curious. Adaora's lips tightened for a moment. Then she said lightly, "Some things are not ready to be seen yet." The girls felt the weight of secrecy, sparking curiosity that would bloom fully years later. Ifeananya tilted her head, eyes narrowing as she noticed the glint of a luxury car parked across the street, its driver lingering unusually long. "Who is that?" she asked. Adaora's gaze followed hers but remained silent. The answer was not for now, but the observation was a lesson in awareness, something Ifeananya would use when the girl's actions shocked the town decades later. Obiageli, brushing paint from her hands, spoke softly. "Mama, do you think we can ever be more than what we are now?" Adaora's voice caught slightly. "More, yes, but more comes with responsibility." Her words were not just guidance. They were foreshadowing the choices that would define the girls' futures. Night fell, and the girls gathered around the small fire in the courtyard. The man from the streets appeared again in the shadows, always silent, always observing. Adora had never acknowledged him, but his presence had become a constant, a guardian figure who would later play a critical role in ensuring the girls' security and eventual triumph. Chinello's sketchbook lay open near the fire, a golden key catching the flickering light. Ifeanyi kept watch, sensing the movement of the world outside. Obiageli whispered a lesson she had learned about loyalty and patience. Ngozi and Uche silently cataloged patterns in human behavior, building skills that seemed trivial now but would become strategic weapons in adulthood. The courtyard, bathed in moonlight, felt alive with potential and unspoken promise. The 5 abandoned girls no one cared about were growing into young women shaped not just by love, but by survival, observation, and quiet strategy. The world would not yet know it, but decades later, their actions would leave everyone utterly astonished. The transition from adolescence to adulthood arrived like a slow dawn, subtle but unstoppable. Adora's home had grown into a modest compound, the courtyard now dotted with seedlings, vibrant flowers, and carefully arranged furniture. Each girl had begun to define herself, blending the lessons of survival with the seeds of ambition Adora had planted. Chinello's sketches were now meticulous plans for real structures, though she still didn't know the full significance of the golden keys she drew. Ifeanyi's gaze was constantly calculating, cataloging every gesture, every movement in the world beyond the compound walls. Obiageli's voice carried authority in the house. She was both mentor and mediator, her soft-spoken nature giving way to firm guidance when necessary. Ngozi and Uche moved with quiet precision, observing and learning, storing knowledge that would later shape their decisive actions. One humid afternoon, Adora called them to the veranda, her eyes tracing each face in turn. "You're on the cusp of change," she said, voice steady. "But the world isn't waiting for you to be ready. It demands more than courage. It demands wisdom, foresight, and sacrifice." Her words hung heavy in the warm air. Flashback. Adora, in her early 20s, negotiating her first small loan to expand her modest home-based business. Her hands had trembled as she counted coins, her back pressed against the wall of a narrow alley, a witness to the merciless world. She had learned then that the right investment, patience, and timing could create opportunity even from the smallest resources. That lesson now informed every decision she made for the girl she had taken in. Chinello broke the silence, pointing at Adora's locked drawer. "Mama, someday, will we know what's inside?" Adora paused, her eyes reflecting both pride and caution. "When the time is right," she said softly, planting curiosity that would later be crucial. Ifeanyi's eyes flicked to a luxury car idling across the street, driver waiting with quiet persistence. "Who is he?" she asked, voice low. Adora looked toward the vehicle but offered no answer, letting the girls sense the world's complexity without full explanation. Subtle foreshadowing. The man's presence had always been quiet, almost protective, preparing for events yet unseen. Obiageli, brushing a lock of hair from her face, spoke softly. "Mama, do you think we can ever take on the world as it is?" Adora's hand brushed hers, firm and reassuring. "Yes, but remember, the world tests everyone who seeks more than survival. And not every test is obvious." Night fell, and the girls gathered around the courtyard fire. Chinello's golden keys glinted faintly in the flickering light. Ifeanyi remained alert, scanning shadows. Ngozi and Uche exchanged a subtle glance, cataloging the patterns of night, the faint rustle of leaves, the rhythm of distant footsteps. Every small observation, every tiny decision, was training for the future when their actions would shock the world. Adora watched from the veranda, her chest tight with the weight of anticipation. The girls' laughter and quiet whispers were layered with resilience, intelligence, and loyalty. The courtyard, moonlight casting long shadows, seemed to vibrate with unspoken promise. These 5 abandoned girls, no one cared about, were no longer helpless. They were learning to wield the skills, patience, and strategy that would allow them, decades later, to return to the world with a force that no one could have predicted. By their early 20s, the girls had become strikingly capable young women. Each carrying the resilience Adora had nurtured alongside the silent scars of childhood no one had claimed. Chinello's sketches had grown into fully realized architectural designs, her mind constantly drawn to patterns, codes, and hidden possibilities. Ifeanyi's sharp eyes noted the slightest inconsistency in human behavior, every gesture a clue to intentions she didn't yet fully understand. Obiageli's voice, once timid, now commanded respect, her insight guiding the others through complex moral dilemmas. Ngozi and Uche, always observant, had honed their abilities in strategy and negotiation, quietly testing the limits of the world while keeping the household functioning in harmony. One sweltering afternoon, Adora gathered them on the veranda, her hands clasped tightly. "You have all grown beyond my teaching," she said softly, "but the world outside, our world, doesn't care about your growth. It will test you, demand more, and sometimes ask for impossible choices." Flashback. Adora, in her 20s, facing a ruthless landlord who threatened to evict her family's meager home. She had argued, bargained, and eventually paid a steep price, her resolve forming the backbone of the lesson she now imparted. The girls were unaware that these experiences had shaped not only her philosophy, but also the secret fortune tucked away in her locked drawer, ready to be a tool for their eventual independence. Chinello leaned forward, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Mama, when we know everything you've been keeping from us?" Adora's gaze lingered on the pendant around her neck, a tiny gold key, and she smiled faintly. "When you're ready, and when the time comes for you to use it wisely." The girls felt the pull of mystery, the unanswered question sharpening their awareness, preparing them for the monumental decisions that awaited them. Ifeanyi's attention flicked to the driveway, where a luxury car had appeared again, its driver waiting with quiet patience. "He's always here," she murmured. Adora nodded subtly, offering no explanation. The man's presence had long been a shadow, a silent witness to their growth, and would one day become a pivotal element in safeguarding the family's legacy. Obiageli spoke softly, her voice steady. "Mama, do you think we can ever truly repay you?" Adora's eyes glistened. "Repayment isn't about money or deeds. It's about what you do with what you've been given, the choices you make, and the lives you touch." Night fell, and the 5 women gathered around the fire pit in the courtyard. Chinello's sketches glimmered under the flickering flames. Ifeanyi observed every movement around them. Ngozi and Uche quietly discussed strategy in whispers. Obiageli, ever the mediator, ensured balance. The courtyard seemed to hum with anticipation, a quiet heartbeat of potential and latent power. The camera lingered on Adora, standing at the veranda, chest tight with emotion and anticipation. These 5 girls, abandoned and overlooked, had been shaped into formidable women. The seeds of wisdom, strategy, and resilience she had planted over 2 decades were taking root, preparing for the moment when their actions, meticulously planned, deliberate, and unprecedented, would shock the world. The 5 women, now in their mid-20s, had fully embraced the skills, wisdom, and resilience Adora had nurtured for 2 decades. The modest courtyard had transformed into a symbol of growth. Plants meticulously cared for, small sculptures and sketches placed thoughtfully, evidence of a home shaped by both love and strategy. Chinello's architectural designs now hinted at intricate hidden meanings. Ifeanyi's vigilance had sharpened into an almost instinctive understanding of people. Obiageli balanced authority with compassion. Ngozi and Uche had become masters of quiet observation, cataloging patterns and probabilities in every interaction. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Adora gathered the women. "Everything we've built," she said, exists because you learn to see the unseen, to protect what is precious, and to act when others hesitate. Her words carried the weight of 2 decades, a reminder of the sacrifices made and the wisdom gained. Flashback. Adora at 24. Walking through the crowded marketplace alone, the first 5 coins of her modest savings pressed tightly in her palm, deciding whether to invest or keep them hidden. That decision, unremarkable at the time, had been the seed of the fortune now locked away in her drawer, a fortune that would one day allow the girls to act in ways no one could anticipate. Chinello's gaze lingered on the locked drawer. "Mama, is it time?" Adeora's expression softened. "Soon, but only when you're ready to wield it with purpose." Curiosity pulsed through the group, a subtle tension building, the promise of revelation yet fully realized. Ifyinanya, noticing a car parked in the distance, whispered, "He's here again." Adora nodded subtly, acknowledging the man who had followed their journey silently for years. His role, invisible until now, would soon be revealed as crucial to protecting what Adora had safeguarded. Obiageli, brushing hair from her eyes, asked, "Mama, what if the world tries to take it all?" Adeora's voice was calm but firm. "Then you use what you've learned. The rest will follow naturally." Night fell, and the women moved with purpose, preparing the courtyard for a gathering that had been long in the making. Chinello's sketches glimmered under lantern light. Ifyinanya scanned the perimeter. Ngozi and Uche coordinated silently, each gesture measured and deliberate. Every detail, every small motion, was a rehearsal for the moment when their actions would reverberate beyond the walls of the courtyard. Foreshadowing layered throughout the scene. The gold key-shaped pendant around Adeora's neck catching the light, the man watching silently from a distance, the hidden drawer, the girl's practiced precision, all subtle threads weaving toward a climactic revelation. As Adora watched from the veranda, chest tight with anticipation, she realized that the 5 girls, abandoned and overlooked decades ago, had become more than she had ever imagined. The courtyard was no longer just a home. It was the cradle of strategy, resilience, and unanticipated power. When the time came, their coordinated, deliberate actions would shock the world, fulfilling the promise of everything she had risked to raise them. The day arrived without warning, yet with a weight that had been building for 2 decades. Adora stood at the veranda, her heart tight, watching the 5 women she had rescued and raised step into the world fully armed with courage, strategy, and wisdom. Chinello carried a portfolio of intricate plans, golden keys etched into every page, symbols of discovery, of hidden opportunity. Ifyinanya's sharp eyes scanned the crowd gathering beyond the gates, calculating risks and anticipating movements. Obiageli's calm authority commanded respect, while Ngozi and Uche moved silently, coordinating logistics with precision. Flashback. Adora in her youth, clutching coins, facing threats from those who sought to take what little she had, deciding to act anyway. Every choice she had made, every sacrifice, had been a lesson in courage and patience. Those lessons had built the foundation for this very moment. The gates opened, and the women stepped into the town square, the people around them unaware of the storm about to unfold. Rumors had whispered of Adeora's hidden wealth, her secret generosity, but no one had expected the orchestration they were about to witness. Chinello unveiled the first plan, a series of charitable initiatives using Adeora's long-hidden fortune, designed not only to aid those abandoned by society, but to expose corruption in local institutions. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the scale and precision became apparent. Ifyinanya, standing slightly apart, revealed the network they had built quietly over years, connections in every sector of the town, knowledge of patterns, leverage over key players. It was a force of intellect, strategy, and moral authority, all emerging from 5 women once thought powerless. Obiageli stepped forward, speaking with clarity that commanded attention. "No one believed in us when we were children," she said, voice echoing. "But someone did, and now we are proving that care, love, and guidance can change everything." A flash of memory for each woman. Chinello recalling sketching golden keys on scraps of paper in Adora's courtyard. Ifyananya recalling observing every detail in the streets, learning to anticipate danger. Obiagili recalling whispered dreams turned into action. Ngozi and Uche recalling calculated strategies rehearsed silently under moonlight. Every memory, every lesson converged in this moment. The man who had observed them from the shadows for years stepped forward, revealing his role as the guardian of Adora's legacy, the protector ensuring that nothing could derail their plans. The crowd erupted in stunned silence as the five women executed the final steps of their plan, exposing deceit, rescuing resources, and redirecting them to those in need. Adora, standing back, felt tears slip down her cheeks as she watched them. The five girls no one cared about, abandoned, invisible for so long, had become unstoppable agents of change. Their actions were deliberate, strategic, and rooted in the love and lessons she had poured into them for 20 years. The world, which had ignored them for so long, now watched in awe, unable to believe the force of what had been quietly growing under her care. Chinello glanced at Adora, a smile breaking across her face. "We did it, Mama." Adora nodded, voice thick. "Yes, and this is only the beginning." The courtyard, now empty, seemed to hold its breath, echoing with the promise that five abandoned girls, once overlooked, could shape the world in ways no one had imagined.